The French Revolution marks a major transition in Western civilization. It caused a shift in politics, culture, religion, and in the organization of society. Though it was a failure in the end, it is often used as a seminal event that marks the beginning of the modern period. Today, we explore the French Revolution in modern history. Before jumping into the French Revolution, we need to take a glimpse into the old regime, or the period before the Revolution. What was it like? Well, it was a period marked by absolute monarchs. If you're wondering about the nature of an absolute monarch, take a glance at Louis XIV. He had complete control over France. Louis famously once said that he was the state. Clearly, everyone was too scared to tell him that he looked ridiculous in high heels and tights, wearing a massive carpet, at least it looks like some sort of carpet, or even a larger wig. Well, in addition to the absolute monarch, it was also an unequal society, with feudalism still enshrined in the laws. That is, nobles had far more rights and wealth than the poor peasants, who composed the majority of the population. Lastly, the Catholic Church was the official religion of France, and it held a great deal of power and wealth, and was closely allied with the state. The causes of the Revolution are manifold. First, the Enlightenment was centered in France during the 18th century, and it introduced many to the ideas of freedom and equality. As with many revolutions, the general population was also upset with the amount of taxes they were paying. In particular, peasants were paying high taxes, yet the poor did not benefit from government spending. More immediately, the recent monarchs had been exceedingly ambitious, spending money on fighting wars, including the American Revolution. Americans like to poke fun at the French for their lack of military skills, but without their support, we wouldn't have won the American Revolution when we did. In addition to wars, the monarchs built excessive palaces, including the infamous palace at Versailles. The current monarch, Louis XVI, a nice guy, was a weak monarch, and his wife, Marie Antoinette, proved to be very unpopular. Lastly, there were poor harvests, and bread prices were increasing, and as we all know, no one is happy when they're hungry. The flashpoint for the revolution was debt issues. And how do you pay for debt? Taxes. And who likes taxes? That's right, no one likes taxes. Louis first asked the nobles, and surprisingly, they weren't interested in paying more taxes. He turned next to the States General, the representative body of France, like our Congress, to raise the money. The Estates General was composed of 3 estates. First is the clergy, the second is the nobility, and the third estate is everyone else, but represented typically by the small middle class in 18th century France. As you can imagine, it was not too progressive, as the first 2 estates usually blocked reforms initiated by the third estate. The Estates Generals had not met since 1614. That's 175 years. Now pause for a second. There was no election in almost 2 centuries, and people were oppressed. But all the king wanted to do was to raise taxes. What do you think happened? Well, surprise, the French people were not thrilled with the king's plan. When the king did nothing to give in to the demands of the Third Estate, they left and formed the National Assembly. The king reacted by locking the door of their meeting hall, which shows that he was a pretty weak individual. Did he really think that they'd just go home if the door was locked? Instead, they found a meeting place on a tennis court and took the famous oath to never disband until they formed a new constitution. The French Revolution had begun. Soon after, the situation deteriorated quickly for the monarchy. Around the countryside, riots began due to the increasing price of bread. In Paris, rumors circulated that the king was amassing a foreign army, and the Parisians decided to arm themselves by attacking the fortress of the Bastille to gain weapons. The people succeeded, killing the guards, freeing the prisoners, and seizing arms. To this day, July 14th, the anniversary of the storming of the Bastille, is a national holiday of France. The last popular uprising was initiated by women upset at the lack of bread. They marched from Paris to Versailles, and they seized the royal family. The royals were brought back to Paris, and at this point, Paris was under rebel control, with the mayor of Paris assassinated and the National Guard, a militia loyal to the National Assembly, patrolling the streets. With the public pressure, the revolution started making changes to the country. They passed the Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen, basically stating that men are born free and equal. Second, they ended all aristocratic privileges. Third, they took on the Catholic Church, seizing property and passing the civil constitution of the clergy, in which clergy had to take an oath of loyalty to the state. Lastly, a new constitution was passed, which limited the power of the monarch. Thus, the three pillars of the old regime on equal rights, the absolute monarch, and the Catholic Church were all weakened. Up till now, the revolution was moderate and mirrored the changes in the American Revolution, but that was soon to change. Now it became a radical revolution, and leadership shifted from the middle class to the artisans and the lower middle class, a far more radical group. In part, this happened because an international army, backed by the European monarchs, was approaching France. They were worried about the decline of monarchical power, and of course they were sympathetic to Marie Antoinette, the Austrian princess. The king tried to escape to this international army, but he and his family were captured. Now, how do you feel if your king left you to join a foreign army to attack you? Imagining the French people were not pleased. In August 1792, the palace was stormed, and the king was arrested. The National Assembly disbanded, new elections under the new constitution took place, and a more radical group was elected, led by the Jacobins. The National Convention, the new body, voted to establish a republic, ending the role of the king, and then they put the king on trial. He was found guilty and sentenced to death. Now chaos ensued. The local government of Paris, even more radical, invaded the National Convention, arresting and executing the moderate politicians who opposed the death sentence of the king. Those loyal to the Catholic Church and the monarchy began a counter-revolution centered in the province of Vendée. Lastly, the international army was approaching Paris. In order to save the revolution, the government needed to centralize. Power was passed to the Committee of Public Safety, led by Danton and Robespierre. Sounds so nice, public safety, right? But in reality, it was responsible for a reign of terror used to control the chaos. Public courts were set up to protect against enemies of the revolution. During the terror, which lasted from 1793 to 1794, 40,000 people were killed, and many more died in the rural uprisings. Nobles, Catholics, peasants refused to fight. In short, anyone who opposed the revolution was targeted. Under the Republic, there was a dramatic change in society. The old provinces, ruled by a noble, were eliminated, and 83 departments were created, ruled by elected assemblies. There was an attempt at social welfare, with the price fixing of food. Education was made public and free from church control. Civil marriage was introduced, and divorce was legalized. Additionally, the radical stage of the revolution sought to de-Christianize the country. France had countless churches, and many of them were destroyed. Some were turned into temples of reasons, used to worship the ideals of liberty and reason. The calendar was even changed because of its Christian roots. Year 1, marking the birth of Jesus, changed to 1792, the birth of the Republic. The 7-day week, based on the creation story Bible, was altered to a 10-day week. They also rid themselves of old symbols from Christianity and the monarchy, creating new flags, coins, and even new patriotic songs. The most popular symbol was Lady Liberty, or Mary Ann. They even adopted a new egalitarian style of dress as well. Eventually, the radical changes were too much, and Robespierre himself was sent to the guillotine. The National Convention composed a new constitution, which was still a republic but limited the power of the lower class. The executive, composed of 5 directors, and thus is known as the Directory. On the left, people wanted a stronger democracy, and on the right, conservatives wanted to return to monarchy. In short, The new government was not popular. But on the sidelines, one French general, Napoleon Bonaparte, was proving to be very popular, and it is to him that we turn to in our next lesson. So why was the French Revolution so significant? In it we see the fall of monarchy, the establishment of democracy, an experimentation with nationalism and secularism. The revolutionaries sought to end the power of nobles and religious authorities. It was the first attempt to form a society based on equality and freedom for all men. This just scratches the surface of the changes brought about by the Revolution. Though the French Revolution failed, the world was never the same after it.